Hey guys, welcome to another edition of Beer Talk Live, presented by loveof.beer. I'm your host, Aaron Quinn, and with me as always is the most handsome guy I know, Matthew Carr. Matt, how you doing tonight, man?
I'm great, man. How are you?
I'm doing really well. I'm super excited tonight because we have our first ever guest. This other handsome dude, not as handsome as Matt, but he's a pretty handsome guy. Right over here, Ben Grant from Dirigo Public House, man. Thanks for joining us, Ben. How you doing tonight?
What's going on, guys? How are you?
Good. I'm glad you made time to join us. I know it's hard owning a restaurant, working in restaurants. It's hard to get an evening off, so we appreciate it, man.
It is better to be here drinking beer or kombucha with you guys than it is to be at the restaurant currently, right?
That's true.
Stripping the floor and repainting it as I was doing previously. So,
yeah. It has a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes, and I think this is going to be a great episode to give people some perspective on the beer side of owning a restaurant.
For sure.
I think people go to restaurants a lot of times and just drink and don't realize everything that goes on behind it, the decisions that go on to make that experience the best experience possible for them. So.
Yeah, of course, because that's what we're looking for, is to make sure that people want to come back and see us, visit us, and enjoy their time. So,
absolutely. So before we get digging into topics, as Ben already mentioned, for what I'm drinking this evening, I unfortunately am cleansing my body of a lot of sugars and carbs, and I'm drinking another fermented beverage, though. At least I'm staying in a fermented beverage state, drinking the kombucha this evening. My wife said, "Why don't you just fake drinking a beer?" And I was like, "Well, then I'd have to open a beer. That would be really dumb."
That's a good point. That's a good point. I have to appreciate that.
Yeah.
Waste not, want not.
Matt, what are you drinking tonight, man?
I am getting into some other half double Citra Daydream, which is a double dry hopped imperial oat cream IPA. It's stellar.
Yeah, I've got some of that in my fridge. I was with the gentleman sitting in line at 7 a.m. before he shipped you that beer.
Dude, it's so good. And then I'm not sure what I'm getting into next. I have Prototype 5 from Foundation.
Nice.
Which is an IPA. I've got Battery Steel Brewing, kind of a newcomer from Portland. This is Avalon, which is a new double IPA from them. And then I've got Lord Hobo Glorious.
Matt will be asleep by the end of this podcast.
Yeah, right, exactly. one more, maybe. We'll see.
Ben, man, what are you drinking this evening?
Well, first I want to ask Matt, have you tried the Avalon before?
I haven't. That's the first can I've got.
Yeah.
Is it awesome?
Well, I have no idea. I would honestly love to get some feedback from you, because we tried to swing by Battery Steel yesterday, and they are sold out until January 6th, meaning that there is no distribution and no cans available at the brewery until this Saturday. So what you have there could very well be the last little bit that's available until Saturday. So I'd love to hear some feedback.
They've been getting a ton of attention lately. I think this is the second or third time they've sold out recently. So good problem to have.
I think they're either brewing on a 3 or a 7 barrel setup. So I mean, their production volume isn't huge, but when you can sell out like that and have to be sold out for days, that is definitely a good problem to have.
For sure.
Absolutely.
You ready?
Yeah, I'm ready for what are you drinking, man?
So I was picking up dinner, and I had Maine Beer Company lunch. And right now, yesterday, Matt and I talked about this earlier, I finished a 4-pack of Florins from Austin Street. I could show you empty cans, but that's pointless. We've got Marshall Wharf, which is a coastal brewery here in Maine. My understanding is that they also are part of a brew pub, and they don't do a ton of distribution. They only do about 200 gallons of either can or keg distribution weekly, which, I mean, for those who are going to follow this, I hope they understand that is a very small amount, considering there's 100 brewers in the state of Maine, and those people are putting out a 7 barrel is 210 gallons, give or take. So anybody who's on a setup bigger than that is producing more than these guys. But this is Cant Dog, which is an Imperial Pale Ale, 9.7%. So perhaps I will fall asleep before Matt does. If we work into the second or third of this 4-pack, and that is my anticipated brew for the rest of this. But Downstairs in the kegerator, we've got Maine Beer Company's Mean Old Tom, which is their stout. And we also have Soul Style. Hold on, I'm coming up with the brewery. Green Flash.
Nice.
Green Flash is Soul Style IPA because Maine is a tropical IPA kind of state, which we you guys discussed in a previous podcast. That is definitely true, and I am not without my own convictions about that. But every once in a while, you got to get dark. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
Amen.
I'm with you. Talking about the battery steel for a second too. A mutual friend of all of ours. I won't mention his name. Ryan Lowell told me that he was going to be sending me some. At one point, I got really excited when they first opened. He's like, "Oh, a friend of mine opened this." And I was like, "Yeah, no, I've heard all about it. Send me their beer."
Yeah,
it never arrived at my house. So if you guys see him, punch him in the throat for me, and then
I'm supposed to see him Sunday. I will.
Yeah, tell him to send me some beer. And maybe we'll have to get together because some of the Bell's Hop Slam is coming out soon. I know both you guys might want some of that. So we might have to
I think they're doing that in a mini keg this year, correct?
Yeah, I think that you told me that actually. I think.
Yes. Well, maybe I'm hinting at it now because I could set something up.
So maybe we'll have to figure something out here and get that squared away after the show. So we're here to talk to Ben Grant. Ben Grant is a restaurant owner. You've been working in restaurants ever since I've known you.
Yeah, we're going into like 17 years, 18
That's
years.
Crazy, man.
Like
that is crazy.
Crazy. We're getting old, dude.
You're getting old.
Yeah, it's true. That's why I wear a hat. You don't want to see what's underneath here.
Fair enough. I'm just trying to press the line right here. You know what I mean?
So, but you have your own place, you and your wife. I haven't gotten to get there yet. Every time I'm home, I'm just too busy. I'm swamped with family stuff, and I'm dying to get down there because I hear great things from everybody. And it's not just friends that are like, yeah, no, Ben's place is great. It's actually, I'm hearing good reviews. And the thing that I like most is the beer menu, along with, I already know you're a good cook. I've eaten your food. I know what you can produce for a menu and quality food. But pairing that with good beer, and you and I have talked before about beer quality, things like when I was working at Kegworks, you were talking to me about glass cleaners, things like that. So I know you care about the product as well. So
of course,
I guess my first question to you is, as a restaurant owner who's also a beer geek, cares about the product. I know you've brewed before, you understand it all. How do you determine your tap list and bottle list to go with the food that you're serving? Like what type of stuff goes into that decision process for you?
Yeah.
So I primarily we want to meet the brewers. There's a big part of the quality of product that comes from who the people are that are producing that product. And if they love what they're doing and are capable, I'm going to try and avoid some wording that may offend people who are on a larger scale or something like that. But the idea from some of the smaller guys, people who are producing, say, less than 3,000 barrels a year, is that they're really focused on their product because they want to make sure that they're producing the best product that they can, they're putting it into market, and that they're recycling constantly. So we always start with meeting brewers. If we haven't met a brewer, we won't bring the product into the restaurant. That's first and foremost. Secondary to that is the product lineup that they have. If they're only producing IPAs and pale ales, let's say they have 7 labels and everything is an IPA or a pale ale, I'm not interested. You, at that point, are not a year-round brewery as far as our business is concerned. To shed some light on that, I have our draft list pulled up here. And I just want to give you an idea of kind of what we're working with. It's the first week of January, and we have Yule Milk, which is an imperial stout from Tuol, which is a Denmark brewery. It's a 15% ABV. It's an imperial milk stout. So you get a little sweetness in addition to that high ABV, and it makes it super creamy and easy to drink. We have Rye IPA from Stoneface Brewing, which is down in New Hampshire. We have 2016 Alexander, which was a keg that spent a year in my cellar at my house before we put it on draft this year. And Rodenbach last year in 2016 hadn't brewed this beer. I think it was it was 20 years. I'm looking at my wife for confirmation, but she's walking away.
I always get confirmation from my wife too.
But that beer had not been brewed by Rodenbach for almost 20 years. So last year we ordered, 2 logs of it. The price point is pretty steep. But for us, the interest in having something like that to sit in our own cellar for a full year prior to putting it on draft, it seemed fruitful, and we want to try and experiment with as much of those things as possible and deliver those things to our guests. I mean, there's 40 bottles in my cellar right now, and Matt, what was it? It was like the Tuesday before Thanksgiving that we did the bottle share.
Yeah, right around there. Yeah.
Yeah, so we pulled a bunch of stuff out of the bottle here at the restaurant. We had a mug club event where we invited people down. They could bring bottles from their cellar or, new things that they had tried and stuff that they enjoyed. But that's getting away from our main topic here. Voodoo Ranger, which is an IPA from New Belgium. We have Urban Gang, which is Oma Gang and Urban Chestnut. Thank you. Which was a collaboration brew, which is a Doppelbock, a big Doppelbock too. It's 9% or something like that, but it has some very light spice notes and some things for people to enjoy. We've also got Bomb, which is an imperial stout from Prairie, which is out of Oklahoma. Whirlpool, which is an American pale ale from Night Shift. Matt, you're familiar with that. Aaron, if you are not familiar with that, we'll make sure to get some Whirlpool out your way.
Yep.
I'm not familiar.
Yeah,
it is stellar.
I have had it, but I want to send some.
I think you're telling some untruths to get some beer sent your way. We took part in a brewery collaboration with Bandit Horn, which is located in Biddeford, Maine. Excuse me. And we brewed a Grotzer, which is a traditional Polish style oak smoked wheat ale. Normally it's on the lighter side. It's intended to be similar to why am I failing at this right now?
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
Shiza. If we curse in another language, does that have to get edited out?
Good. Yeah, you're good.
Okay, all right, perfect. Thank you. It's supposed to be brewed similar to a grisette, which was intended for coal miners and stuff like that. It was like a sustenance thing at lunchtime. They would have a couple because it was a low ABV. They could go back to work and still have some energy for the day. We also always have a cider on draft. Burnside Brown Ale from Foundation. Nice. Maniac Double IPA from Strong Brewing, which is up the coast here in Maine. Blanc, which is another IPA from Bunker Brewing, located in Portland, Maine. Sublimation, which is a Dampf beer, which means steam beer, because the word sublimation, it's going from a solid to a gas with never going through the liquid stage. And it's kind of, I guess the way that they brew that particular beer is similar to distillation, though the alcohol content never gets that high. And if somebody who's following this podcast proves me wrong, excuse me, I will gladly eat all of the words and drink all of the beer.
Me too.
Who is it that does that one, Ben?
That's from Nice Brewing, which is in Limerick, I think.
Okay, right.
Yeah, they're a ways out there, but it's hard for us to get out and see some of these cats.
I do think you're right about the steam ale too, because Anchor Steam, when Fritz Maytag started Anchor Steam, I think he just bought distilling equipment and used that original because there wasn't a lot of brewing equipment available, and so he used what he had for equipment available to brew a style that could be brewed. So I do think it is similar to distilling.
Yeah, I mean, and as long as you're talking about the end product being less than, I think it's 15% ABV, then you don't have to label it for cordials or liquors. So Bitburger, which is a German Pilsner, it's just clean and crisp, and it is what it is. It really plays to the handful of people who might disagree with doing craft beer as a whole. So rather than play to them with the major domestics that are available to us, we've decided to find a craft brewer who is still producing, I think Bitburger produces something like 800 hectoliters a year, which is equivalent to, God, I hope I don't get this right. I mean, wrong. Well, I don't care if I get it right either. I think is about 5,000 barrels a year when you're talking about 800 hectoliters, something, because I don't know what a hectoliter is.
I'm so bad with math.
It's fine.
I believe you.
And anybody who's following this hopefully is drinking and isn't trying to do the math.
Yeah.
And then Kentucky Fried Chicken from Against the Grain, which is down in Kentucky, which is a bourbon barrel aged amber. So for us, like we're like the Bob Ross of beer for our area. Like we got a whole palette of stuff. Anybody who walks through the door is going to be able to find something that they can enjoy from the I'm not going to use bland. The
lighter.
Bland.
Thank you. Yeah, from the
less abrasive.
From the Pilsner, the lager situation. People who enjoy beers can find a Pilsner that they enjoy, and I think that's a style that is sure.
I've had some really good pills lately that craft brewers are getting into some of those lighter lager pill styles, and they're nice stuff. Nice crisp sometimes is just the way to go.
Yeah, of course. And I think, you're looking at a transition that a lot of brewers were like, okay, what can we do? And they produced IPAs, at least here in the state. And then they went to a double IPA and they were like, how do we make something taste delicious without being boozy hot? And then they rolled into saisons and then into sours, whether it's kettle soured or whether they're using, a strain of bread or petio over a duration of time in a barrel. And now Pilsners are kind of like the primary, because it takes very little to ruin a Pilsner.
Yes.
Like there's not a lot there as far as the flavor profile. You're looking for a little bit of bready.
No.
Yeah, exactly. You can't just cover that turd in sugar and call it a donut. You know what I mean? It doesn't work that way. So with Pilsners, I think a lot of craft brewers have really delved into that. And Riverton Flyer from Foundation, I think, is absolutely one of the best Pilsners that I've tried. Yeah. It is the brightest. It is the most yellow, like clearest, like read a playing card on the backside of a glass kind of Pilsner that I have ever seen. Aaron, you for out there, PC Pills, I think,
I
from
like PC
Founders.
Pills.
Yeah, I mean that is a killer beer, and I think that those two beers are probably gonna back up against each other the best that anybody could. So
yeah.
It seems like Hell's Lagers are really hot right now too.
Excuse me.
Jack's Abbey, one of the best beers I had last year. They did the it was like I don't know if it's called Beer Geek. I think I'm messing that up. I'll have to look it up later and post it. But Jack's Abbey did a Hell's Lager. It was a small run, something just put out for a little bit of distribution, and it was unbelievable. I did it with a tasting that I was having, a food pairing that I did with a cook here, and it was just super crisp. It was in the middle of summer, and people were like, "Dude, I got to get more of that." And kind of lesson learned: don't bring a rare beer to a pairing when people want more of it. But I was like, you can just try the house lager; is really good too. Go get that from Jack's Abbey's. But yeah, no, it's a nice style. When you were mentioning those styles, that's all stuff I like. I mean, we've talked before, Ben, when I was trying to get the Cicerone server, trying a bunch of different styles. I love styles. I love the whole palette. How are customers taking to some different stuff? Because when I go to restaurants nowadays, I see some stouts, maybe a brown. It's all IPAs outside of that and domestic. So how are customers taking to some of these different styles, like Doppelbocks? You don't see a lot of Doppelbocks at restaurants.
Sometimes it goes very well.
Yeah.
Other times it is met with a lot of anguish, I guess is the word.
People are kind of unsure of.
Yeah, and for us, that's a big reason that we do additionally carry. I mean, we have 16 draft lines. We also carry probably 20 to 30 different cans and bottles, and the benefit of cans and bottles sometimes is the shelf life.
Right.
And, you know, when you're talking about throwing a keg on there and you've got 30 days to go through the keg, okay, so you've got 30 days to go through a keg, but a can that somebody's producing, you might have, you know, 60, 90, especially for the hoppier beers, you're only looking at about 90 days for a total shelf life. But some of the browns and porters, and I mean, right now we have an imperial stout from, gosh, I can't come up with the name right now, but a brewery in Quebec called Le Grand Noir Coeur. And I would say that it probably sells less than the imperial stouts that we have on draft, because people are looking for draft beers just as a whole.
Sure.
But it's definitely nice to have something like that you know is going to age very well. But going back to the consumer, it's hard to explain to them that the heavier malts and darker beers are going to age well. So when you're talking about having, I mean, we got KBS back in May. For those who might be, you know, not familiar, Kentucky Breakfast Stout, which is from Founders. It's a 12.8% imperial stout that's aged in bourbon barrels, Kentucky bourbon barrels, and then is put out into the market in May during the Kentucky Derby. Well, May doesn't seem like a great stout season for the most part.
Right.
I mean, you're talking about warmer weather, and, you know, you're talking mint juleps and all this kind of stuff, which are awesome cocktails. Don't get me wrong. I'm down for a little bourbon on ice with some crushed up mint because it's fresh and delicious and all that kind of stuff. But drinking an imperial stout at 13% or almost 13% in May just seemed wrong.
That beer is not designed to drink right when you get it.
Right. So we held on to it. We tucked that away in the cellar until the beginning of November. And that's the time when you want to drink a beer like that. You want to have that feeling. And, you know, after 7 months of aging or 6 months of aging, you're probably looking at a little bit of a higher, maybe you've got 1/10 of a point, 2/10 of a point on the ABV. But that's a beer that you can say to somebody, over time you lose the booziness, over time you gain a little more on the alcohol, and it smooths out and
settles.
But you have to be able to give that information to the guests who are coming to enjoy that beer. Now, 60% of the people who come into our spot are looking to us specifically for our knowledge of the product. 40% already have an idea of either what they're looking for or how beer is made and stored. And that becomes very helpful, especially when you have something that's either super fresh or something that you've been aging. I mean, the 2016 Alexander, that sat in my basement for a full year. And we put it on draft, and we had a dozen people walk through the door and said, I don't want anything but that. Give that to me, because I know that Rodenbach they're like the oldest of OGs when it comes to sours. They're the original sour as far as their label says. And you know, who knows what breweries opened and closed in that time, but like, they do a killer job with their product. So when you're talking about something that's been sitting there for a full year and you put it on draft and it's just a little bit sweeter and not quite as acidic, and it's just this phenomenal flavor profile with hints of cherry and all this, like, beautiful, you know, there are going to be a handful of people who absolutely, hands down, can appreciate that beer. And there's going to be a handful of people who look at you like you're an asshole. And that's, you know,
that happens to me, and I don't even own a restaurant. So.
But, you know, that's why I try to vary our lineup as much as possible. But stay true to the core values that I have about craft beer, that Katie and I both have about craft beer, and making sure that when somebody sets foot through the door, there is something that they're going to enjoy. That's first and foremost.
As a fan of all styles, like I said, I appreciate that. Matt can walk into any restaurant and find some hoppy, juicy IPA, and that's great.
I was just thinking, actually, that bottle share that you had, what was it that we were sampling there? Was it Curio from Allagash?
No, the interlude, the 3-year-old interlude.
I saw the picture.
That was, I mean, absolutely, of all the beers there, that was by far my favorite. And I think that speaks to what you're talking about, of know when to serve it, know when to age it. You know, all those things go into the decisions that, especially beer restaurant owners make and think about and try to create that experience.
Yeah, for sure.
So, you spoke a little bit to only serving beer, that you've met the brewer and so on and so forth. So how important to you...
don't bring up the Founders thing.
No.
Don't bring up the Founders thing, because I haven't gone out to Founders, but I know they make a decent product.
I got gifts.
Okay?
Yeah, right, yeah.
Yeah, let's go. I don't care.
Road
trip. Yeah, sounds like a road trip. I smell like road trip.
Sounds like a ride-out to me.
Yeah.
So, but especially for the people that are close to you, how important is that relationship that you have with the distributor sales reps that are bringing this beer in for you, or the sales rep from the brewery directly, or marketing people, or owners, or what have you? How important is that relationship to you and the decisions you make? What are the differences you see between those relationships and the types of people you have to deal with? Talk a little bit about that.
Oh man, Matt, I feel like you're baiting me right now, but I'm gonna take it and I'm gonna run.
Only good,
be
good,
nice,
right?
Be nice.
No, you know what I mean? Like there's definitely as a restaurateur, let's call it. Attaboy, finish that up. You know what? I will too.
We'll get into you, Ben. We'll get into the battery steel Avalon. We'll see what that's like.
I'm just gonna knock this. I'm gonna
yeah. Drink your pink drink.
Yeah.
When we're talking about breweries, brewery owners, there's definitely some cliquey situations that that we find ourselves in. The city of Portland, especially. We're only 10 minutes north of Portland, so you're talking a $1 bus ride or a 10. I mean, is that a confirmation? Like this smells good?
Yeah.
Or okay, all right.
Yeah.
But you're looking at like 7 square miles, where probably 65% of all the beer in the state of Maine that is produced, distributed, I don't some other adjective, that's where that beer is going.
Yeah.
And for being 10 minutes north of there, I will tell you first and foremost that it is the most frustrating, annoying, pain in the ass kind of situation.
Yeah.
Because it's like, the thirsty pig is going to have first shot at.
Sure.
Yeah. And the Great Lost Bear institution. Don't get me wrong. Like those guys are OGs as far as the Portland beer scene goes.
I've killed a few towers there.
Right. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They're going to get preference over outside of the city, which when you're looking at the demographics of, per capita spending, people who have the ability to spend $20 on a 4-pack, your market needs to expand beyond the small saturated, like Portland, as far as beer is concerned, is like a paper towel that you dipped in a 5-gallon bucket. And then there's so much beer there,
right.
So much beer there. And you've got, breweries like Orono Brewing Company who are delivering there once a week. And Strong Brewing, which is in Sedgwick. Nobody even knows where Sedgwick is.
Right.
Who are delivering there once a week. And when you're looking at this marketplace, there is a huge discrepancy, I feel, and maybe it's just me because I'm in Yarmouth, you know what I mean? But there's a big discrepancy, I feel, in what people are willing to do to get their product known.
Sure.
Like, if you're only delivering your beer to one city in the state of Maine, outside of where you're actually brewing, you're limiting yourself and you're putting it on the consumer to then drive 15 minutes out of their way or an hour out of their way.
Right.
Bandit Horn and Mass Landing are 2 relationships that we at Dirigo have had. MBC, which is right up the street in Freeport.
Sure.
These are people who we have spent a lot of time with. We drank a lot of beers with. We've done collaborations with, as far as, tap takeovers and merchandise. And you know what I mean? Like, there has been a cultivation of that relationship. And Banded Horn, we talked with them about doing a specialty beer and like going down and hanging out and doing this stuff. And we went down, we brewed with them, we spent the day, we drank beers. I mean, just a phenomenal time. Like the kind of welcoming and relationship that you would expect from people from Maine. You know what I mean? And like, I think you guys both understand exactly what I'm saying when you say a person from Maine, like, oh, you're cold? Well, here's my shirt. Or, you know, like, you don't have a ride? Here, let me go a half hour away. Yeah, right. Exactly. You know what I mean? And I think that a lot of the focus for Maine brewers is on a single city. Right. And they're doing everything they can to make that a feasible and viable situation for as long as possible. The Eamskip beer box that, you know, is going to Sweden once a year. Are you eating Stein Dry?
No, that was the last episode, and that stuff is phenomenal, by the way.
Well, and you were 100% correct. Adam Stein is the tasting room manager for Foundation. Yeah. So segue, and now everybody has to go back and listen to the last episode.
That's right. Yeah.
But Adam Stein, who's the tasting room manager, he is also Cicerone level 2, which is not your certified beer server, but your actual Cicerone level 1. Now, if anybody has done the Cicerone thing, it's such a pain in the ass because it's like, well, your level 1 is a certified beer server, but your level 2 is a Cicerone level 1. I don't understand it.
Sure. He's higher than me. That's all I know.
Yes. Yeah. That's and he kills it. He does a phenomenal job.
And talk about a person. I mean, just so like cool and high energy and just
right. He's playing basketball at 6 a.m. every day of the week.
Right. Yeah.
What is he doing?
Yeah. Right.
You're not going to find me at the basketball court at 6. You know what? I don't even play basketball. But you're 100% correct that the relationships that we cultivate with the individual brewers, breweries, tasting room staff, I mean, those things are definitely influential and weigh towards who gets placement in our restaurant.
Sure.
We're never going to turn anyone away. We're never going to say, you know, like, your product's not good enough. Do you guys want to hear a bad story?
Yeah, sure. Why not? You don't have to mention names if you don't want to.
Oh, no, I will. I don't give a shit. So Katie and I spent some time with a brewery in Portland, Shipyard.
Yep.
And
kind of an OG from the brew pub era.
Right. Well, and you know, I personally have had some physical issues with Shipyard's beer because I think that the yeast that they use, I have an allergy to, which isn't here nor there for this particular story. That's just something that I put out there. But I used to drink, I mean, Shipyard and Gritty's were the ones that introduced me to the craft beer scene for sure. Yeah. And I know it's the same for both of you guys. We went there. We got a tour. We had the whole thing, you know, like, oh, you know, this is, I was like, dude, I know how to brew beer. I have brewed beer at home.
Right.
Like it's a simple process of adding water,
just different scales.
You know what I mean? Yeah. Add water, get sugar, add yeast. Yeast eats sugar. Sugar, you know, becomes alcohol and carbon dioxide, and here we go. We put a little more sugar in the bottle.
A little bit of cleaning in between there, but
well, cleaning's a whole different story. That's for another show. But at the end of this all, you know, we had a pretty long conversation about what is it that Shipyard isn't doing as far as marketing to today's beer drinker. And I put it on the table. You know what I mean? Like you guys know that I shoot pretty straight. If somebody asks me a question, I'm going to answer the question.
One of my favorite things about you.
Well, thank you. And the response to that particular question and answer series was not a positive one. And I expressed that there were some parts of their product lineup that I was interested in. And if they were willing to let me kind of cherry pick their lineup, that we could do business together. The answer was, okay, no problem. We'll have somebody out there next week. That was in January.
Nothing. That was a year ago.
I have not seen a sales rep. That was January of 2017. Like this actual week that we are talking about right now, because we took some break back then. And the sales rep has yet to come in and discuss with me the products that, you know, we might be interested in carrying. Sure. And that's fine. Like I'm a little 65 seat spot and I have 16 draft lines and I've never done business with you before, but your word is your balls. You know what I mean? And if you're going to tell me that you're going to send somebody out there to me and we're going to have this conversation and we're going to discuss your product and its placement in my particular restaurant, you know what I mean? People are coming to me with the expectation that these are the beers that they should be drinking.
Right.
And everybody who walks through the door.
That's it. It's positioning. And I think that's we'll get into this in a later episode. One of our friends, Seth Hasey, who I think you know.
Who's a rep for Sebago. Like Seth a lot,
he's a great guy. And, you know, I think there's a lot of leftover, you know, early to late 90s brew pub era breweries that kind of fit in that envelope of Shipyard, Gritty's, Sebago, those guys. Some of them have figured it out and some of them haven't. And to me, some of that is about positioning. Your establishment, if I was Shipyard, is one that I would want to have my beer in because it's on the same lineup as everybody who's doing the current stuff. And it starts to create that that feeling of, yes, we're relevant.
Sure. Well, and I mean, you're talking about Shipyard who just put out Finder, right? And Finder, again, Aaron, I know that we are not talking to you, you beautiful man. I can see your cute little face in the bottom of the screen. You know, it's a situation where they've tried to enter the market with a beer that is supposed to pair up against what the current market is driving.
Right.
But instead of putting a small batch of Finder into the marketplace and letting people try it and experience it and do that kind of thing, they immediately went to every account who always carries Shipyard, and they just said, "You're putting this on. You're putting Finder on in place of Monkey Fist, or you're putting Finder on in place of, you know, some other IPA, Fuggles, or you know, whatever." And now you're in this position where it's just the same person who would have drank Fuggles or Monkey Fist is now being forced into drinking Finder, instead of what you wanted to have happen, which was to create a new market for an old beer.
Right.
You know, like you've completely missed the mark as far as I'm concerned.
Which is that whole thing
to reach the new consumer. Yeah,
that seems weird to me because places like that, at least when I was at Bucks, they would come to us, at least the distributor, and say, "Hey, we're putting out a new beer. Can we do like a special night? Bring that beer, put it on tap, get it to the consumer, see what people think. If you guys like it, can we put it on tap?" They rarely came to us and said, "Switch over your tap handles, guys. Like this is what we're putting on now."
Well, and I think that feeling is coming from, there are so many more brewers. I mean, you and I worked at Bucks together like 8 years ago.
Right.
So in that 8-year span, Maine went from 60 craft brewers to 100 craft brewers.
Right.
And the beers that these guys are producing are heads and shoulders in quality above some of these other beers.
Yeah.
And the guys who are swinging the biggest, you know what I mean?
Penises.
they're saying, okay, so our price point is phenomenal. You want to stay inside our price point. We've developed a beer that should compare to these other beers. Just take it and try it. Instead of trying to give some exposure to that beer beforehand. Whistlepunk, I think, is a phenomenal double IPA.
Absolutely.
Kai and the guys at Sebago Brewing Company have killed it with Whistlepunk. The problem with Whistlepunk for me is that they never do a brewery-only release. It immediately goes out for distribution. Earn the respect from the craft beer community because it's too readily available when it's available.
Sure, scarcity, man. It's that whole supply and demand model. Yeah.
But you know, in that conversation of scarcity, I think for me, as I'm hearing you talk about this kind of puts you as the restaurant owner a little bit of a pickle because you're talking about wanting stuff that is a smaller size in barrels, which you start to deal with consistency issues. When you're having lower scaling of recipes, you're also dealing with the availability issues of competing with the Portland market. But you don't want to go to the big guys because they're also not going to treat you right. So how does that feel of putting you kind of in that middle ground pickle place that you want to provide the scarcity, good, rare beers, but at the same time, the guys that are scaled up are able to provide you more quality,
consistent, available, all that. Yeah.
This goes back to the conversation about how, like we talked about relationships with brewers and reps and distributors and so on and so forth. First, you have to have a relationship with a brewery because the brewery has the ability to do an allocation.
Yeah. Right.
They can say to a distributor, like, we have 30, sixtels of X, and these 10 accounts need to be taken care of as far as an allocation goes. That limits you guys to another additional 20 for the first people who ask.
Sure.
Now, there has been some pay-to-play stuff that has taken place, and we've seen it in the newspapers and whatever else, that some distributors are getting hit for if you buy this, then I can make this available to you.
Yeah. Right.
I don't play that game. Like, first and foremost, you're not going to tell me what I can and can't buy.
Right. I'm pretty sure it's
just
illegal.
who I am. Well, it is illegal, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't happen.
Yeah, no, I get it.
Yeah.
But when we're talking about creating a relationship, sometimes you just make friends with somebody. Like, I think I'm a pretty amicable guy. So when I see you smiling, Matt, I don't like that.
Yeah, I saw you. I saw you earlier.
But that's one of those situations that you are creating a relationship with the brewery, and then secondary to that is your relationship with your distributor. So when your distributor comes to you and says, hey, do you need an order this week? And you say, well, I was just talking with X, and they said that on the keg line this week was going to be Z.
Yeah. Do
you have any? And their response comes back, well, no, I don't. So you shoot off a text message real quick, and you say, hey, distributor A says that they don't have this. And that person responds, well, their truck just left the loading dock with 30 kegs of it. So they should have it in their inventory pretty quick. And then that puts you in a slot where you're the first person to be able to order that thing, because you know that you have created that relationship with the brewer, that they're not going to bullshit you.
Right.
And you've created a relationship with the distributor that if you say, I know that it's on a truck and it's on its way to you, put it in as an order, that they're going to do that for you, because their paycheck is made whether you are ordering or not. You know what I mean? Like, if you order beer, they get paid. If you don't order beer, they don't get paid.
Yeah.
So you have to, unfortunately, play them as much as they're trying to play you get you to buy something new or something you haven't tried. And, that's where we find ourselves every week.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about this often often in the 2 episodes we've had so far. At the end of the day, this is business, right? Like, it's beer, and we all love it, and it's this huge kind of culture that we participate in. But at the end of the day, this is business, and that stuff happens, man.
Yeah, well, and like I said, we talk about allocations, and we talk about some limited availability and stuff, and there are some things that I have seen, and you guys can see those things for yourself, and this is a very delicate and dangerous spot for me to talk, so I'm not going to mention any names because of what I do. But you can see who is clicking and how they're going to make their money because of a particular person that they know.
Sure.
And it's just where it's like, oh, hey, like, tap takeover. Okay, great. Wait a second. Tap takeover with who?
Right. Yeah.
Oh, well, that's weird because that wasn't made available to me.
Right. Yeah.
But legally, and I'm going to do the air quotes thing.
Yeah.
I'm going to do it a lot.
It's supposed to be available to everybody.
Right. The minute that somebody asks in the state of Maine, that product is supposed to be available to them. And if you're only sending enough product to this state for allocations, that gets you into a very, very unusual place of limiting your. We're just gonna move on.
Yeah.
And that happens up here too. There's a particular restaurant group that kind of has a stranglehold on craft beer bars in our area. Great group of guys. They have great restaurants, great beer taps. But you will notice stuff comes into our area first in a certain area, and you'll see some tap takeovers that nobody else can even consider getting their hands on, or beer releases in their particular establishment that no one else is even going to get close to getting their hands on. And while us in the beer community don't mind it, because it's the beer is available to us, so we don't care who's got it.
Right. Well, so this is the thing, is that on the consumer end, the consumer end, it's like this like no holds barred, like this is this and whatever. And it's like, you know what? The issue that I'm having is that consumer, you don't consume at this one place.
Right.
You consume at hundreds of places. Well, maybe not hundreds. Well, if you're me, you consume at hundreds of places. But that becomes the struggle. You know what I mean? Like who now is going to decide who's getting what and when it's going to be delivered and where it's going to be delivered and how that event is going to take place. You know what I mean? And like the cats at Hoof Hearted, which is out of Marengo, Ohio. Yeah. Like they produce some killer beers. Yeah. Like I have never drank a 12% triple IPA that tasted as juicy and wonderful as Dragon Saddle. Yeah. I haven't tasted some regular IPAs that have tasted as wonderful as Dragon Saddle. And if you've never had Dragon Saddle, I feel bad for you. What's that?
It's our Great Lakes water. It's great for
right. Yeah.
I promise you.
They're kind of the tip. But that's, you know what I mean? Like that is a very, and those guys, I understand their business model. They have what they have for their locations in Ohio, and they have a very small amount that they can distribute to other places. So sometimes the state of Maine gets 30 cases of pounder cans. Sometimes they get, I think when Barrel Aged Fitness Freak hit, it was like 20 cases of this 14% barrel aged, like bourbony, delicious, no booze. How are they producing a beer that doesn't taste like alcohol? I have no idea. But it's so good. And okay. You guys are still there. Okay. Oh shit. Hold on. I need to plug in the computer.
I was gonna say we lost you for a second there, but we got you back.
Yeah.
You only lost me for a second. I'll be right back.
Definitely an interesting thing though, Matt. We'll continue on with that because I do see the struggle of in our area with that. You don't really think of it as a consumer that certain guys are getting beer and certain guys aren't. Like I said, I'm happy that somebody's getting it, but the other restaurants
somewhere. Yeah.
Right. Oh, we lost Ben.
He'll be back.
Word. I hope he has the link still and can rejoin us. So definitely a difficult thing. You don't think of as a consumer that these guys, they're trying to get people in the door too, right? They want to get the hot beer, the fresh beer, things like that. And when there's a personal relationship involved, that's got to be frustrating.
Yeah, I think so. And I mean, I think favoritism, look, as we've talked about before, this is a trend industry. There's a ton of positioning and placement. Ben was talking about how Portland kind of sees a lot of the action there. I think a lot of that has to do with influencers, if you will, people who post a lot on social media, people who get a lot of attention, people who make a lot of noise. That kind of those establishments that supply those people, certainly, whether or not anyone would want to admit it, get first pick of what's out there, what can be available to the people kind of second, third down the line, and so on and so forth. So my dog's freaking out because he thinks somebody's here, but
but nobody's here.
Yeah, no one's here. Hey, come here.
We're having a little chaos here live. That's what happens when you do a live show.
That's right. It's just part of the excitement, man. This is a beer podcast.
Yeah, it's happened. Yeah. I got an infant and well, two-year-old almost, and he goes nuts sometimes in the background trying to get to bed. You hear feet stomping and stuff like that on my other podcast. So
yeah.
It happens, man.
It happens, exactly.
Beauty of live TV.
My 8.5-pound dog is gonna kill whatever comes through that door right now.
That's right.
Yeah.
So we lost Ben here. I'm hoping that we do get him back because I did have some other questions for him. But while we're waiting on Ben, is there anything else that you were getting out of that conversation that we can chat about a little bit?
Yeah. I think it's interesting to hear kind of the guy who brings this stuff to the rest of us at a retail level outside of going and purchasing directly at the brewery or at the store. It's interesting to hear his perspective. I think Ben's a neat character in that he's fairly unbiased in what he says. And I think a lot of what he said tonight has been pretty spot on, right? Like whether or not people who are involved in this scene want to hear it, a lot of this is true. If you haven't been to Dirigo, they're in Yarmouth, Dirigo Public House. Definitely go check them out. I have mug number 1. I'm just going to brag for a second. Our organization has mug number 1. So
there he is.
Well, hey, there he is. We're pretty excited about that, but definitely come down.
A terrible person. I didn't plug my computer in.
That's okay. I do it all the time. And actually, I don't even have my plug out here. So what we're going to do is we'll get into this last question here I had for you anyway, and we'll wrap it up. We try to keep it in a somewhat tight window here. I could talk to you all day, to be honest. I hope you'll come on again.
Yeah, please do.
Because
I am constantly coming on.
Oh, God. I love it when you say that to me. But this is a topic I'm super passionate about, and I know that we could probably talk about it for a long time. We'll try to keep it a little bit tight here.
He sends me messages like at least twice a week. Dude, look what they did.
There's 2 things that I'm super annoyed with beer and like online stuff, and one I'm not going to talk about today, but you may see a parody account come from me of beer selfies from a man. We'll talk about that some other time.
I love the duck face selfie. Don't get me wrong. You can follow us on Instagram at Dirigo Public House, and you can see shirtless duck face selfies of this beautiful face.
I don't mind that.
Time.
Yeah, I'll get that a like every day. I'll tap twice on that all day.
Yeah.
But the thing that bothers me the most, and I see it when I go out in restaurants, and I see it on Instagram when I see people pouring, some dummy sticking the whole faucet in the beer, pouring it with all that bacteria, just pouring into the beer. Dirty glasses. I get dirty glasses all the time. Wherever I go, I see it on other people's tables. It drives me absolutely bonkers. I see beer pictures. Somebody's got this delicious beer, some monkish or something. They post a picture and it's got bubbles just dripping up the side of the glass. So people, while craft beer,
for everybody who doesn't know, that's called micronucleation.
Yes.
Okay.
It is. And it's
dirty little particles of shit stuck to the inside of your glass.
Not properly cleaning your glassware. And so this is something that I've talked to a lot of breweries around here, a lot of people around here, because they want the quality of their beer to be good, right? They want to give it to you, trusting that you're going to provide it in the way that they intend it to be when they make it. So craft beer is coming up. Consumers are getting smarter than ever about beer. But yet I do feel like, for the most part, and I don't know, I know you're not the case because I've talked about some of the stuff that you bought for your restaurant, that people do not understand the hygiene. They do not understand the serving. They do not understand the proper pouring techniques of beer. What's it going to take? Like, what do you do at your restaurant to train people to make sure that they're educated and serving beer properly?
So first and foremost is being active. Right? Like you need to try your product. You need to be involved in the purchasing aspect. And, there's this fortunate there's this fortunate piece of the world that people live in where they can own a business that they don't actually have to work in. Like, congratulations. I'm so proud of you. But realistically, if you're not hands-on, then you don't know yourself. And if you don't know yourself, you can't deliver the information to the people who are taking the goods to, guest A and guest B. And it's the same with food. I think, it's the same scenario with food. If you're not there, if you're not active, if you're not part of it, then somebody says, oh, my hamburger tastes like, bleh.
Yeah.
Okay, well, then why does it? And then if you're involved, you can track that all the way back. You can figure out, does their hamburger actually taste like bleh, or are they just a bleh person?
Right.
Which, is part of the world that we live in. There are trash can people all over the place.
Mm.
And I'm not going to defend, restaurants versus trash can people. I'm not going to, whatever. But there are instances that it takes place for sure. We've all seen it happen. We've all been part of that situation. But you have to be involved. And if you're not involved, then you're not going to get the level of service, the quality of product that you anticipate.
Yeah.
And for me, I am constantly behind our bar checking to make sure that your dog's barking. It just surprised me. I haven't done this before, so I saw the little mic pop up. I was like, what?
What is that?
If you're not involved in the process, if you're not participating, if you're not informing the people that work with you and for you of how to properly serve, how to, maintain the glassware, or what beer we're putting on next, you know what I mean? Like,
right.
That's a situation that you can find yourself in, 5 or 6 times a week.
Yeah.
Without any questions. I mean, like, on my list of places to visit is Church Key, which is just it is inside the city of DC, and Church Key has an individually regulated glycol line for every single beer that they pour.
Yeah.
So that if you're drinking an Imperial Stout, that is pouring at 53 degrees.
Right.
So that every beer you drink from that place is poured at exactly the temperature that it's intended to be served at. Now, that is a beautiful situation for somebody like me, somebody who just wants that.
Right.
But it's not realistic for my situation.
No,
because
it would cost you an arm and a leg too.
Right, you're talking about $150,000
easy
for a draft setup. Depending on how many lines you have and
how long,
and whatever. Because you're talking about a dedicated glycol machine for every single line.
Right.
I know a guy. If you want to do it, he would gladly take your 100K plus.
Yeah.
Well, I also know the same man. He's been emailing me since you did that. But that's the kind of stuff, you know what I mean? Like that is the wet dream of Beer Bar to visit for sure. Like that is the kind of place that I want to go to, but it is not real for our situation. So we do the absolute best that we can in making sure that our staff is trained. And if there is something like that, if there's a situation where we're serving an Imperial Stout, we say to somebody, hey, this is the deal. Imperial Stouts are supposed to be drank between, 50 and 55 degrees. So if you wouldn't mind holding that glass in your hand for a minute before you take your first sip, and then it puts it on the consumer. You know what I mean? Like if the consumer's not interested in doing that and they just want to get right into their beer, I'm not going to fault them for that.
Sure.
Shit, that's what I want to do.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
But at the same time, it helps to educate the consumer. You're giving them information that they may not have.
Right. Right. Well, and that that goes back to what we talked about in the first third of this whole conversation about when you're aging something in a basement, or you're holding on to something from May to October, and somebody says, "Well, doesn't that make it too old?" It's like, no, this is actually counterintuitive. Like this beer is actually better 6 months older than it was.
Right.
And that beer is that much better because it's 3.5 years older than it was.
Right.
And I appreciate the craft beer community because they stand behind things like that.
Yep.
Like when you read a review on Rate Beer or Beer Advocate or, just whoever's blog is doing whatever, excuse me, they are putting out the information. Maybe not always correct, but for the most part, I think that they're really feeding the market to let people know, yes, this beer is meant to be consumed from day one through day, 1680 some change.
Sure.
From day one to 5 years out, this beer, Bourbon County comes with a label on it that says buy or No, not best consumed by. Can age for up to 5 years.
Yeah,
I think that that's a beautiful thing, and it really helps the industry, because people are like, I know that this is a beer that I want because everybody else wants this beer, but then the beer itself is saying, hold on to me.
Yeah, right. I see people popping those caps. Like I said about KBS, like people pop it right away.
Sure.
And to me, I love those beers. I've got some still in my basement from 2 years ago or whatever. And I love those beers, but when I see somebody pop it right away, I have some CBS just chilling right now. And I want to drink it. I want to try it, but I don't want to try it because I know if I pop that thing open, it's going to rip my throat out.
Right.
It's going to not taste the way I want it to. And so I do appreciate that too. I see it on bottles now, like best aged, aged up to 5 years, things like that.
Yeah, like spend some time with it. And it doesn't mean that you're right or wrong. It means that you wanted to try it day one.
Yeah.
And you tried it day one.
You're excited. You're pumped.
Right. You know what I mean? And day one, like for the people who are interested in doing some cellaring or doing some aging and stuff like that, I always hope that when a special release comes out that they have the ability to grab 2 or 3 bottles. Right. You know what I mean? Like, okay, you got that bottle. Great. Like, I'm so excited for you and I want you to enjoy that bottle. And, you see somebody who immediately throws it up on some like beer trade website because they're looking for a 6-pack of some douchey IPA from California or whatever. And, it's like, no, man, like you have 3 bottles of CBS.
Right.
So have one now. Try it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like see what it is. But do yourself a service by writing down something about that beer that you appreciate. And maybe something that didn't work for you, and tuck that away, like wrap it around the neck of the bottle you're willing to age with a rubber band.
Yeah.
So that when you open that next bottle, you can look at that and you can go, oh shit, like this, I really liked the the mild saltiness, but I didn't enjoy the, overtly booziness, X, Y, and Z. But now you have something to document against that next bottle, whether it's a year or 2 or 5 down the road that you try that beer. Now you have something to compare it to.
Right. I love the way you're talking right now, man.
and then you can experience that beer twice.
Right.
And you can decide in that moment which of those 2 beers was better for you. Right. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Like,
and sometimes it goes really wrong. I've had.
Oh yeah.
I was telling Matt a couple episodes ago because I love Cellar. Like everyone at Kegworks used to make fun of me, like, "Oh, Mr. Cellar," and because I'm always buying multiple. I love it. It's one of my favorite things about beer.
Yeah.
And but I've definitely had to go wrong. I do think I would love to have you come back and we could do a whole episode just about cellaring because I do think more people should do it, even people that aren't into the style, just because of the changes. You don't get that in a lot of beers. I mean, obviously, if you drink something super fresh and then wait 30 to 60 to 90 days, you'll see some changes. They'll be pretty subtle compared to a year, 6 months letting something age.
And like when we're talking about, I mean, I think that we have come to terms that we're talking about stouts or imperial stouts or something that's darker and malty and hefty. But a friend of ours who brews at Mass Landing, which is a brewery located in Westbrook, Maine. Everybody who doesn't know, the last couple of times that they have released these double and triple hopped IPAs, they've exclusively mentioned, do not drink this on the day that it's released.
Right. It's not ready.
We want you to wait 4, 5, 6 days. Like, give it a little bit of time because I think that the word that they used is it's too green.
Yeah.
Which is this like raw kind of overtly hoppy flavor that they're not looking for.
Right.
But are getting because the expectation of the product delivery is happening on a certain day.
Right.
So
it's been in cans for 2 hours. We better get it right now.
Right. Yeah. Don't do that. Don't do that. You know what I mean? And like when you're looking at Maine Beer Company with their dinner IPA, dinner.
The bottles are still wet when you buy them.
No.
I've had some happen that way.
Well, that's because they're pulling them out of their assholes.
Yeah.
Aaron is currently making that face because he's like, I'm gonna have to edit this.
I know. Going on. I'm gonna have to find some animal noise to put over.
Yeah.
Dinner is bottled the day before the release.
Yeah.
And the reason that they do that is to make sure that everything is ready to go so that they can take it out of the bright tank, that they can taste it, they can make sure everything is on point.
Yeah.
It probably finishes fermenting on the Monday before the Friday that they bottle it and then release it on Saturday.
Right.
Because realistically, excuse me, all the hop oils, all of the malt bill and the yeast and all of the things that are making this beautiful, delicious golden liquid, everything needs some time.
Yeah.
First and foremost, you know what I mean? Like you don't get a beer on the day that it's brewed, which I think a lot of people don't understand. I think a lot of people see a beer, like, oh, we're brewing X today. Well, that's going to be available today. And it's like, no, it has to sit for 3 weeks. And
I think some people would drink right out of the bright tank if they could.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
I would absolutely try that.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that I wouldn't.
I mean,
because I want to see the difference between these things. But, that's one of those situations that I think a lot of people find themselves in, where they expect that the fresher a beer is, the better it's going to taste.
Yeah.
When realistically, what is the guy's name who owns Alchemist?
Oh,
Something
I should know
Koch,
this too.
right?
Yeah.
It's very similar to Sam Adams as far as the name is, but
yeah,
he does not drink Heady Topper in the first 3 weeks that it is canned.
It's too rough. Yeah. It's too rough.
At weeks 4 and 5, he has said very clearly that weeks 4 and 5 are the weeks that he prefers to enjoy Heady Topper. And that's coming from the person who owns and brews the beer itself.
Right.
Do not drink this beer as fresh as it possibly can because it's too raw. It's too, you mentioned throat cutting. You know what I mean? Like, this is an 8% double IPA that is hopped to balls. And this is not when it is meant to be drank.
Right. And for me, I've left some IPAs in the back of my fridge, not knowing, forgetting that they were there. And I actually do prefer some stuff a little bit out. I like malt. So I like for that malt to come through a little bit, mellow out, especially some of the more assertive bitter, not juicy hop stuff. The assertive bitter stuff really mellows out if they have a nice malt bill on it and it sweetens up a little bit. So that's a nice flavor profile. And maybe it's not as long-term aging like you're talking about with cellaring and stuff like that, but another week, another 2 weeks can really change the flavor.
Huge difference. Absolutely. Yeah. So last point on this before we got to wrap it up here because we're getting close to the end of our time. But last thing on this, Aaron often points this out to me, and I don't know if you guys watch Parks and Rec, but there's an episode in a Parks and Rec where all the people put their mouths over the fountain of the water fountain. Please take the beer glass off of the fountain that the beer is coming out of. It doesn't need to be in the beer. I don't want that in the beer. I don't want your mouth all over the water fountain. Stop doing that, right?
Yeah.
I know your guys are well trained. You luck out, Ben, in that you have, kind of a couple really key people that are pouring the beers for you that really know what they're doing. If you run a beer restaurant and
if you're on
any
any restaurant,
beer,
I don't even care.
Yeah, right. Especially a beer restaurant.
Yeah.
Take the glass off the fountain, please. If I walked in and put my mouth on your water dispenser, how would you feel about that? Let's stop that already.
Yeah. And honestly, like I see, so I used to not say anything because I worked in the industry for so long that I just kind of let things go sometimes because I know people are busy or whatever. Now I say something every time, and things that bother me are that. Another thing I saw the other day that I had to say something, I was like, go get somebody to fix this. The guy was like just pouring full bore and the beer was just super foamy and it's like pouring out the side and he's just trying to catch it up. And I'm like, you just wasted like 17 ounces of beer, dude. Stop.
Right.
Stop
you're killing it. So last thing before we wrap up here, Ben, you've been very gracious answering our questions. Anything you want to bring up or stuff you want to ask us or insults or jokes? What do you got for us before we wrap up here?
Rinse your glasses.
Yeah.
Prior to filling them with beer. the removal of that head tension by that little bit of water in the glass will save your restaurant hundreds, if not thousands of dollars every year. Yeah. If you need a glass rinser, you ask Matt. Matt can send you to somebody, or you ask Aaron. Aaron can send you to somebody. Get a glass rinser.
Yeah, they're not that expensive for
rinser. No, it's like $125, and if you can't install it yourself, you're probably too stupid to own a restaurant anyway.
Right.
But second.
Yeah.
No, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say you have to make sure that people are using them. I see a lot of places with glass rinsers, and people.
Oh, I know. Well, and that goes back to what I was saying about being involved.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, if your people are not using the glass rinser, they haven't been trained. They don't trust you. They don't respect you. You know, whatever the piece of it is. But you need to be there in some fashion to say, hey, every one of these glasses needs to be rinsed. Right. That's the first and foremost. Before it goes to the tap, rinse the glass. Yeah. Keep your faucets out of your glasses. Third is to ask somebody who cleans lines in your area if the lines that they're cleaning, whether they're doing them caustically or if they're doing them with, some natural, whatever. Is he going to pee right now? What is he doing?
No. I just pee. I just go. I borrow the baby's diapers and just have at it.
I like your style. See if your lines need to be cleaned front to back.
Right.
This is a new thing that New Belgium has only started within the last 3 or 4 months, is to make sure that everybody who pours New Belgium's beers, when their lines are serviced, that they clean them from the faucet back to the keg.
Mm-hmm.
Because the algae, let's do this. The algae, when it's flowing in this direction, just constantly lays down as the product is going over it. Right. But if you're forcing it back to the keg, it has to break free. There's no, you know what I mean? So this is a conversation that people need to have with the people who are cleaning their lines. They need to decide from themselves, what are we going to do? Are we only going to do it for this one line? Or are we going to do it for all of our lines? And realistically, I think the answer is you should be doing it for all of your lines.
Yeah, it's a tough thing to do, right? Because recirculation, I don't know. Anyway.
Recirculation
cleaning is so much easier. You just hook up a bunch of jumpers and set it up, and that's better than nothing. Because I'll tell you one thing that you guys are super lucky for in Maine is that it's a health law that that lines are required to be cleaned. Up here in New York, it is not.
Yeah, they have to be maintained by the distributors here.
Right. Here, it's actually outlawed that the distributors are able to clean the lines because it's considered a favor or something. So it's not required. So there's a lot of bars that you go into where the business owner doesn't give a damn about the beer. It's just he just thinks of it as money. He doesn't realize that money is actually, he's losing money by not having good, clean lines and stuff. So in a lot of states, it's a huge problem.
You're affecting the product,
right?
Like, let's say other half, right? Other half is this beautiful New York brewery who does killer beers, right?
Yeah, right.
Just absolutely. And like they've crushed it with collaborations with a ton of Maine brewers. Bunker comes to mind with that weird milk stout thing, milk maple sugaries. I don't know. I can't remember what it's called. But like, if you're the brewery and you are selling your beer to a distributor, and your beer is then going to a bar, and that bar is disrespecting the product that you're putting into their location by not maintaining clean lines, by not cleaning the glassware, the consumer is the one who's going to think that you're a dirtbag.
Yeah. And actually, it's a huge problem here. We'll wrap this up here in a second, but that is a huge problem. I talked to a lot of brewers. They actually have not gone out of their breweries, some of them, because they are terrified of the lines and stuff. So there's even people that try to refuse kegging, even though it will help their business, because they don't want to hurt the product, which will ultimately hurt their business. If somebody tries a beer off a dirty line one time, you're probably not going to get that customer.
Yeah, I mean, that's an absolute catch-22, and realistically, you're supposed to change. I think that the Cicerone standard for line changing, like 100% removal and replacement, is 2 years.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
Now, please don't, quote me on this and do your own research to find the answers or whatever.
Oh, the comments are already coming on YouTube, man.
Yeah, you're done.
Yeah.
But
But that's something like you're allowed to, as a consumer, to walk into a bar or a restaurant and say, "Hey, when was the last time you guys' lines were replaced?"
Yeah,
or
I've
when was
advocated to some of them to post it.
Sure. Ask when the last time the lines were cleaned. You know what I mean? Like
and if
this is a free information market.
Right.
Yeah. Realistically, if somebody's like, and they give you that look for more than 2 seconds, then either they're trying to hide it from you, or they're not interested in sharing that information with you. And if they're not interested in sharing that information with you, you probably shouldn't be going there anyway.
Right. Well, Ben, I do think we should have you on again, because we could talk all night about different topics of beer. I think there were some topics that we wanted to hit with you, and we're just ramping out of time here.
More to come.
It's because I'm really long-winded.
No, but it's a good conversation. I'm very appreciative of you coming on as our first guest. And people that didn't have a chance to get to watch this live, if you're watching this on YouTube, you can also download the podcast. We are available on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, Podbean, and like I said, here on YouTube, you can watch all of our handsome faces as we talk, which is a really cool feature. If you're listening to this podcast for the first time, we do our episodes live on YouTube, so you can interact, take questions at the end. I do it with some of the sports podcasts we do. It's really cool. People seem to like it. So come on over. We try to do them on Wednesdays. Usually we go bi-weekly, but we had this great opportunity to get Ben in, and we've been dying to talk to him. So we doubled up this past one here. You can also find us on Instagram at Beer Talk Live Pod, Twitter under the same handle, and our Facebook page. So come join us. We'll be always out there talking, sharing pictures of our beer. Maybe you'll see some selfies of me shirtless. Who knows? I can't make any promises. We'll see how this diet treats me. But
if you only do 30 days every 6 months, it ain't doing anything, bro.
It's not.
And if you are lucky enough to live here in Maine, and you haven't been to Ben's restaurant, get to Yarmouth. Dirigo Public House. They're on Route 1, right next to Maine Coffee Roasters, right? Best burger voted by the populace. Best burger in Maine. Definitely one of the best beer lineups in the entire state. Mad dope guy.
As I said, as I stated.
Yeah.
How many people made 90s references to Mad Dope Guy?
They make almost everything in-house. I'm super picky, and I wouldn't trash Ben on here while he's live, but even if he wasn't here, incredible restaurant, incredible beer, great experience. Go check them out. Come back next week. We're on next week, right? Yeah, next week. Yeah. Come on back. Speaking of local people, I got Nate from Flight Deck Brewing here in Brunswick. He's going to jump on with us sometime in the near future. We get some other great guests coming. Thanks for listening.
Yeah,
I tried to lock Ian down for tonight.
We'll get him. We'll get him.
We're not worried about it.
I'm not surprised that you are, but he said he was going to be home bathing the kids.
Yeah. Excuse me.
I got to go bathe the kids right now. So anyway, stay tuned to our social media to find out when we're going to be going live, what shows are coming up. We'll post out as far in advance as we can. If you have any ideas for shows, hit us up and just get involved. As a beer, we can't do it without you listeners. So appreciate everyone that did listen. For Matt, Ben, I'm Aaron, and this is another episode of Beer Talk Live presented by loveof.beer.